To me, consciousness is awareness. Awareness is paying attention and noticing. And so 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of unconscious automatic programs that we've just practiced so many times that we're not consciously thinking about those. So in order for you to change, to answer the initial question that you asked, the first step is you got to become conscious of your unconscious thoughts. And you got to start looking at those hardwired thoughts that you think every day that are just circuits that have been fired and wired together. You just have to sit down, close your eyes, and not move. And then you'll start seeing.
What am I thinking about right now?
Yeah, and all you want to do is observe the thought, because when you begin to observe that thought, you're no longer the program now. You're the consciousness observing the program, and you're starting to pull out of the program.
Thinking about the thinking.
Yeah, who's doing the thinking of the thinking about the thinking? That's who you are when you're not the program. That's awareness, right?
Yeah.
You got to become aware of how you speak, how you act, become so conscious, so aware of it that you won't go unconscious and let that thought or that behavior run you. You got to say, oh my God, this feeling that I've been living by for the last 20 years is actually guilt. I didn't know it was guilt because it just feels like me. And all of a sudden, as you start becoming conscious of it, you're beginning to objectify your subjective self. You're pulling out of those programs, and nobody likes to do that because it's uncomfortable. They'd rather turn on their cell phone, start texting, get on the internet, watch TV to distract them from that moment. And that is what they have to move through in order to get to their own personal freedom. So the first step is becoming conscious. And meditation means to become familiar with, to become conscious of, to become so conscious of your unconscious self that you won't go unconscious to any thought, any behavior or emotion. And get ready, because it takes a tremendous amount of energy to do that, and awareness to stay conscious. And so we fall from grace.
Yeah.
Fine. You're awake, you got another day, let's go again.
How often do you fall?
Oh my gosh. I mean, how many times have I done it? Thousands. But I'm not going to give up, because the moments in which I do connect, or the moments that I do have that transcendental experience, what matters the most after it, when I have that transcendental moment, I look back at all of those difficult meditations, those difficult days. And those are the ones you remember. You don't remember the good meditations. You remember the ones where you came up against yourself and you went a little further. And you said, I'm going to go a little further, I'm going to go a little further. Or you had a rough day and you just went in and you at the end of the day, you surrender and you have the classic, oh my God moment. There's no linear correlation. It's just whether you're willing to live in creation instead of living in survival. And so you get better at it. We just get better at it. And for me, staying conscious and staying aware and staying present is an art, because you know when someone's present with you in your life because they're paying attention to you. You know when they're not present with you because they're not paying attention to you. So imagine this field of information, this intelligence that lives within you and I, that's governing everything material in this world. It's a self-organizing intelligence. You have access to it, so you better get present with it as well as you can get present with anything else. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That realm you can't experience with your senses. You can only experience with your awareness. So then people have to take their attention off their bodies and go from a somebody to a nobody. Take their attention off the people in their life and go from that they identify with, and go from a someone to a no one. Take their attention off the things in their life, their cell phone, their computer, their car, and go from something to nothing. Take their attention off where they sleep, where they work, where they're sitting, and go from somewhere to nowhere. Take their attention off the predictable future and the familiar past and time, and go from sometime to no time. And now if you're taking all of your attention off of everything material in this three-dimensional reality, now there's only one other thing that's left. That means you're in awareness, your consciousness. And now, that is the bridge, that is the door to the quantum field. And you can't enter the quantum field as a somebody. So, if someone has spent their whole life working on having the perfect body, or so much so they have so much attention on their pain, where you place your attention is where you place your energy, it's going to take some work for them to take all of their attention off their body, right? Because they'll do it and then they'll go back, let's see if the pain's still there. Oh, the pain's still there. So it's a little bit of a waltz in the beginning, but as people start applying this, you start getting better at it. As an example, we had Bond University, university in Australia on the Gold Coast. Senior researcher took the large majority of my brain scans, and she had them analyzed by her graduate students, and they statistically looked at everything. One of the most startling things for the research team was our community's ability to get to that point where there's nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time. Now I'm talking 4 seconds. I'm talking 5 seconds. I'm talking 9 seconds. Just give me a second. I know how to do this. They've practiced it enough times that the creative moment is when you get beyond yourself, when you dissociate from everything known in your material world. Turns out when you do that and you start changing your brainwaves slow down into alpha and theta, you're suppressing the memory bank of the known self that keeps you plugged into three-dimensional reality. When you quiet down this mechanism, now all of a sudden you start connecting to that field. And when you can stay conscious in those subconscious realms, when you can literally regulate and change brainwaves, now you're in the operating system where you can make those significant changes. So we now know that when people apply the formula, we have a huge frontal lobe, and it's 40% of our entire brain. And most people, when they have a thought, they just think that that's the truth. And I think one of my greatest realizations in my own journey was just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So if you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and we do, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, and you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, your life's not going to change very much, because the same thought leads to the same choice leads to the same behavior creates the same experience, and the same experience produces the same emotion. And so then the act of becoming conscious of this process to begin to become more aware of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, it's called metacognition. And so then why is that important? Because the more conscious you become of those unconscious states of mind and body, the less likely you're going to go unconscious during the day, and that thought is not going to slip by your awareness unchecked, because it means to know thyself. The word meditation means to become familiar with. So as you become familiar with the thoughts, the behaviors, and the emotions of the old self, you're retiring that old self. As you fire and wire new thoughts and condition the body into a new emotional state, if you do that enough times, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So it's so important, just like a garden. If you're planting a garden, you got to get rid of the weeds. You got to take the plants from the past year and you got to pull them out. The rocks that sift to the top that are like our emotional blocks, they have to be removed. The soil has to be tenderized and broken down. We have to make room to plant a new garden. So primarily, we learn the most about ourselves and others when we're uncomfortable. Because the moment you move into that uncomfortable state, normally a program jumps in. When that program jumps in, it's because the person doesn't want to be in the present moment and engage it consciously. So when you teach people how to do that with a meditative process, it turns out that when they're in their life, they're less likely to emotionally react. They're less likely to be so rigid and believe the thoughts they were thinking. They're more aware of when they go unconscious back into a habit, and that is what starts the process of change. And so we have to unlearn before we relearn. We have to break the habit of the old self before we reinvent a new self. We have to prune synaptic connections and sprout new connections. We have to unfire and unwire and refire and rewire. We have to unmemorize emotions that are stored in the body, then recondition the body to a new mind and to a new emotion, like deprogram and reprogram. That's the act, and it's a two-step process. And it is a danger, because then people will shrink back into mediocrity, and they'll use the insight to excuse them from taking a leap. They'll say, I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. My father was really overbearing. He was a perfectionist. That's why I am the way I am. People, they come up with stuff to excuse themselves. The insight is actually giving them permission to stay limited. And it's an amazing idea, because they'll say to you that they really want to get over their anxiety. But let's take your ex-husband, let's put him in a straitjacket, let's duct tape him and shoot him to the moon. Now what? What are you going to do now? You still have to make those changes. And so then when the person's enemy dies, or something shifts in their life, and that person's gone, they'll find another person to hate. This is just how we function as human beings. We just slide another reason to feel those emotions.